Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you all so much for being here at the Washington Fair Trade Coalition event from the ground up. Um, Local organizing and global solidarity in the face of corporate power. My name is Julie Buana. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the director of the Washington Fair Trade Coalition, which is a coalition of over 70 Washington labor unions, environmental organizations, and other social justice organizations that are um, fighting for a fair and global trading system, which I'm sure we will kind of get into what that will look like in a bit. Really grateful to have you all with us tonight on this Human Rights Day as we highlight the grassroots resistance to corporate power and fascism, make these really important connections to global solidarity movements, and look forward to the fights that lie ahead. I want to give a special shout out to our incredible speakers that we have tonight, as well as our organizational sponsors, our amazing volunteers, our board, and our incredible intern, Ari, for helping put everything together. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are gathered, albeit virtually, on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish tribe. We honor their stewardship of this land, past, present, and future. And we know that, the fight for economic justice and trade justice is deeply interconnected with the fight for Indigenous sovereignty and environmental protection. So I would really encourage everyone to go beyond acknowledgement and to go to realrentduwamish.org to pay rent to the original peoples of this land. With that, just really quickly, acknowledging things we're going through right now. I hope everyone is safe. There is record flooding happening in various areas in Washington state. It's a state of emergency. So I really hope that everyone here is safe and that your loved ones are safe and that, the state is able to respond to keep folks safe. I think this is a really scary reminder of the real toll of the climate crisis, and oftentimes the communities communities in the global south, low-income communities, Black and brown communities, immigrant communities, these communities that have contributed the least to the climate crisis are the ones that bear the brunt of it. So again, hoping everyone's safe. So I do want to take a moment to quickly go over tonight's program. First, we'll have the honor to hear from three incredible community organizers who are on the front lines of the fight for justice. We'll gain valuable insights about their organizing and how we can get plugged in. We'll have a short Q&A session after that, and then we'll take a look at where the trade justice movement stands now and the work that we're doing, the Washington Fair Trade Coalition. And then finally, we'll go into a fun interactive breakout room to do some kind of collective brainstorming about what organizing and resistance will look like in the new year. So I'm quite excited about that. I know, especially towards the end of the year, people start to feel some Zoom fatigue, which is completely understandable. So I hope that this more interactive experience will be something that will be fun and great for folks to be able to directly participate in our work. And so for that breakout session, we'll be discussing a couple of questions. I'm putting them in the chat here. We'll talk about them again, definitely, before we break out. Again, that's going to be near the end of the program. And so, just maybe start thinking about them as we hear from our incredible speakers. So before we dive in, just a few housekeeping things. As usual with these Zoom events, please stay muted throughout the event unless you're speaking so we can avoid background noise. If you do encounter any technical issues, please message Ari in the chat for any assistance. Live captioning is available to support accessibility, so you just need to click the CC or live transcript button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and select show subtitle. and yeah, please feel free to share your questions, reflections in the chat throughout the event, and definitely any questions for the speakers, or you can hold them until the Q&A session, and we'll kind of monitor that, and we will have you ask them live if you would like. Um, Again, I feel like not necessary in the space, but always like to say it. Feel free to share your comments, reflections, and questions, but please keep it respectful. And finally, this event is being recorded, and it will be shared on our social media. So lastly, people have really sounded off in the chat, which has been great, but please, we'd love to know who's in the room with us. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, share your name, pronouns, organization if you're affiliated with one, and where you're joining us from. And thank you again for being here. It's so exciting to have folks here and to continue to build this solidarity. So we're going to go ahead and get started. The main purpose of this event is really to celebrate Human Rights Day and highlight the organizers on the front lines of the fight for human rights and justice in the face of this increasing fascism and corporate power. So we have the honor of having some really incredible grassroots organizers with us tonight. Jessica Rojas is with the International Migrants Alliance and the Defend Migrants Alliance. Edgar Franks is with Familias Unidas por la Justicia. And we have Maya Morales with the Washington People's Privacy. So without further ado, I will start handing it off to our speakers. Just as a reminder, please put any questions you have for them in the chat. So I'll start with Jessica. She's a she, her pronouns, and she's an organizer with the International Migrants Alliance Washington chapter, which is an alliance of grassroots migrants organizations from around the world organizing against the root causes of forced migration. She participated in the steering committee of the 2023 PNW People Over Profit Coalition that organized a People's Assembly and mass mobilization and confrontations during the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum that came to Seattle in 2023. WFTC was also a part of that. Ima additionally joined and helped contribute to the National No to APEC Coalition, which organized to oppose the heads of state meetings in San Francisco that same year. She's a daughter of farm workers from the Central Valley of California and passionate about connecting struggles for collective rights and liberation. So Jess, I'll hand it off to you.
Hi, everyone. Happy International Human Rights Day. It's good to be here with some familiar faces. Good to see folks again. Appreciate the invitation to join tonight's call and share a little bit about the work that we've been doing. Um, as Julie shared, I'm with the International Migrants Alliance, which is a group of grassroots migrants organizations around the world fighting against the root causes of forced migration, but also for their rights and welfare and against all fascist attacks on migrants. Um, what that looks like here locally is we've been waging different campaigns in support of asylum seekers, recent migrants, and migrants who've been here in Washington State for many years. And most recently, we've teamed up with the Tango Migrante movement to launch what we call the Defend Migrants Alliance, which is an alliance of over 100 organizations, labor, environmental, churches, and migrant-led and grassroots organizations who've come together to fight against Trump's fascist attacks on migrants. I'm going to share a little bit about our most recent campaign, but to kick it off, I'm going to do what Ima believes is the most important and put the voices of those most impacted first. So for this, I'm going to ask everyone to turn your volume all the way up. I'm going to show a video from inside of the Northwest Detention Center. Quality as you can imagine, inside of NWDC can be tricky. So it might be a little low, but I think it's worth listening. So I'd like to introduce you to who we call Kuya G, also known as Greg Sorio. And we will hear directly from him a little bit about his story. Let me make sure I shared sound. Oh, where did it go? Where did he go? Sorry, apologies. Um, okay, here we go.
Hi, my name is Greg Isorio. I'm here at the ICE Detention Center in Tacoma, Washington. 37 years old. Today, I have a situation that the ICE called me in the intake, and I was told that I am getting deported today. I've been medical neglect for 5 months. It's just kind of not right when the medical people here cleared me to trouble when they're the one who's being doing the medical neglect on me. And I am on steroid right now, medication, and I have 11 days left of medication, which is if they send me back to the Philippines today, I am not gonna be well and might die out there because I wouldn't have my medication and I just started my treatment. And one more thing, I'm still on the wheelchair. I can't even walk yet, and the consulate said that they did their job, but they did not. They never really helped me at all. They never advocate me, and they can stop me being deported if they really advocate me. And it's just sad on my part because they're gonna send me to the airport in the Philippines. I can't walk, and I don't know what's gonna happen to me over there. But I want to say thank you for everybody that's been helping me since day one to right now. Um, Hopefully, there's gonna be a miracle that this flight can stop and I get to stay. But if not, I mean, I think it's a suicide on my part because my colonoscopy doctor told me that if I don't maintain my treatment and my medication, which is the steroid, in a year I have to maintain it straight. I am gonna have a life threat life threatening disease and I'm gonna have a colon cancer. So yeah, that's all. Thank you very much.
That video is from Greggy this past Sunday, December 7th. I'm pleased to tell you all that there was a miracle, that Greggy got his miracle. His miracle came in the form of the grassroots migrants movement refusing to let ICE and the for-profit Geo Group put Greggy Sario's life in danger. As you heard directly from him, Greggy experienced extreme medical neglect while he was being held at the Northwest Detention Center. Sorry, I haven't watched that in a minute. Um, Medical neglect, where he began defecating and vomiting blood 5 months ago, and continuously went to medical, where he was seen by Geo Group guards and seen by Geo Group hired um, doctors, which is the for-profit corporation that runs the Northwest Detention Center, and was told to have some ibuprofen and go back to his cell. It wasn't until the grassroots migrants movement, through the Defend Migrants Alliance and Tango Migrante movement, fought to get him seen by a hospital, where he was then held at St. Joe's Hospital for over 2 weeks because he was yellowing in his skin color due to the amount of blood that he was losing. The only reason they actually admitted him to the hospital was because he had a bone infection in his pinky toe. A bone infection that was so bad, he winded up having to have 2 surgeries to amputate it. Greggy showed up to the Northwest Detention Center, a healthy 37-year-old. He's 37 years old. He should not be living through this level of infection and horrific medical concerns. And it's only been through the grassroots migrants movement and community organizations and labor unions and um, churches who've come together to raise the alarm of the situation that's happening to Kuya Greggy that has allowed us to actually fight. Greggy was literally on the plane to the Philippines this past Sunday. When we found out that he was getting deported, the grassroots movement, who had been in an encampment outside since Saturday night when we first heard he might get deported, sprung into action. We activated medical professionals from across the country. There was protests at consulates of the Philippines from Washington, D.C. to Northern California to Southern California to here in Washington, where we were fighting to raise the alarm that this man could literally die on a plane. We had medical professionals examine his paperwork, where every single one said he is not medically fit to fly. The Geo and ICE doctor on Sunday afternoon said the opposite. They said he's good to go. We refused to take that as as the answer. So we then went to Philippine Airlines, the airline that they had purchased his flight on, and we began to raise the alarm with all of the flight attendants, with the pilots. We spoke to all 18 of them. We had medical professionals calling the corporation, demanding that they actually take a look into it because they had the right to deny. We contacted legislators, our new mayor in Seattle, Katie Wilson, called Philippine Airlines herself. We had those within the port commissioner's office contacted by many of our allies who had legislative contacts. And late, literally on a flight that was about to leave at 9:30 p.m., at 9:25, CBP officers boarded the plane that Greggy was already on and escorted him off because Philippine Airlines said he is medically unfit to fly. They agreed with us. And so the grassroots migrants movement ran ourselves to SeaTac Airport to then try to demand that ICE take him directly to a hospital. If the if the grassroots migrants movement is saying that, and Philippine Airlines medical staff is saying he cannot fly, he needs to go to a hospital to get treatment, not be put onto a plane that could threaten his life. You heard it directly from Greggy. He said it's basically a suicide, me getting deported. The medicine that Greggy needs isn't even available in the Philippines, or when it is, it costs a lot of money that he cannot afford because he's been detained for the past 9 months. So, this story, which is just new this week, and maybe you've seen it in the news, is the work that we've been up to. This is just one story because we're not done fighting for Kuya Greggy. The very next day, we were able to, through his legal team, achieve a temporary restraining order, which will not allow him to be deported for the next 2 weeks, hopefully buying him time to finish his medication. But we will continue to fight until he is released because no one deserves to be in this rotten place at the Northwest Detention Center. And we will continue fighting for all migrants. As the Defend Migrants Alliance, we've been fighting for migrants and asylum seekers and many other migrants where we've successfully had, I believe, 6 releases between Filipino organizers, Venezuelan organizers, and more. Our work has looked like partnering directly with those most impacted, sharing the true stories of who's being detained because it's not criminals, it's our families, it's our loved ones, it's those who are our neighbors in the day to day. And we've been inspired by the powerful stories of who we call Auntie Lynn or Llewellyn Dixon, who fought bravely to share about the conditions inside of NWDC, and continue to fight alongside of her union, SEIU. We continue to fight with Maximo Landonio, who is also a labor leader who is detained at NWDC, who we successfully fought for his release in July. He now literally goes back to visit other detainees at NWDC, even though he was just released this past July. And he fights for their release. Him and Kuya Greggy are close, and he continues to fight for the release of so many different migrants and many who he met himself. So, as EMA and the Defend Migrants Alliance, our main role is to uplift those most impacted, to organize and to fight because we refuse to accept, even down to the very last minute when people are already on the plane, we refuse to accept fascism as the current state. We refuse to accept fascism, and we will organize and bring as many people together, whether that be our legislators, whether that be our grassroots movement, whether it be the youth, whether it be the students, whether it be retired doctors who completed the medical testimonies that were needed in order to get Kuya Gregi off of that plane. So I wanted to share just a little bit about what we do. I could just talk for a lot longer about it as well. But I thought sharing a powerful story from just this week would be the most impactful, especially on International Human Rights Day, because Kuya Gregi's human rights have been violated in every way. But we will not stop fighting until we get justice. So I will share some links of ways that you can support and continue and participate in the fight for Kuya Gregi because the fight's not over. Like we said, we're not going to stop fighting until he's free, until they're all free. Thank you, Julie, for the invitation.
Thank you so much, Jess. Thank you for those incredible words and that insight. And I think it really is so powerful to hear directly from Kuya. And my cat is also very touched, clearly, and just really an incredible show of people power. Like you said, down to the last second, he was on the plane, and the work of Ima and a bunch of different activists and folks and the community really coming together is really incredible to see. So thank you again so much, Jess. And again, please do put your questions in the chat or save them for the live Q&A. Next, we get to hear from Edgar Franks, who is the Washington State Campaign and Political Director for the Independent Farm Workers Union, Familias Unidas por la Justicia, or FUJ. He works with union leadership and allies in the development and implementation of the Just Transition Framework that centers food sovereignty and worker organizing and innovative models of participatory democracy, such as people's movements, assemblies, and tribunals. Edgar has strong farm worker roots in Skagit County, Washington, where he grew up, and he honed his organizing skills supporting the formation of the first independent farm worker union in Washington State since 1986. As an organizer, he works in Whatcom and Skagit counties and sometimes travels to Eastern Washington to meet with farm workers as needed and support their organizing efforts working with FUJ union organizers. And before joining FUJ, Edgar served as the Civic Engagement Program Coordinator at Community to Community Development, working to engage allies to develop strategies that ensure the voices of farm workers are represented at all levels of the political process. So Edgar, I will hand it off to you.
Thank you. Good to see everyone here. Currently in Spokane, Washington. This is where I am living almost here most of the time. I'm here at my stepdaughter's basketball practice. So if you hear yelling in the background, it's the team practicing over there. Yeah, and I think it's important what the stories that Jessica just shared. I think we do need a united front right now to combat the attacks on immigrants and working class people here in the US and all over the world. And I think IMA does a great job of that. And I think that's why we are also members of IMA. So if your work revolves around immigrant rights, wants to get more political education, wants to get involved, reach out to Jessica and Ima. They're a great resource and a great organization and network that will get you plugged into a much broader movement, a global movement. So, I think it's important to not only have the context from where we're at, but also the context of the global perspective. And from that, you can see how what's happening here is not a unique thing. It's happening all over the world. So the system, it's interlinked, powerful, but so are the global movements that are organizing against it. And we just don't see it or hear about it, but they're there and they're doing a great job everywhere, from the Middle East to the Philippines to Canada, everywhere. There's immigrants, there's organizers there on the side of immigrants as well. Um, yeah, I'm part of Familias Unidas por la Justicia, again, an independent farm worker union. Our membership is based in Skagit County. Um, yeah, and I think the issue of human rights, especially right now, it's one of great importance. Mm, I was thinking about kind of when reflecting about the questions and the day itself, um, and what it means to be a farm worker right now, and what can we contribute uh, to human rights. Um, and I think one of the ways that we want to see the world that we're not just a labor union per se. We do have a contract, the union contract that covers partners, but we know that just staying as a labor union and administering a contract is not enough to help other people. Like we cannot be isolated and just to ourselves right now, especially in this moment in time. Um, Human rights is, we as farm workers, we have been excluded from many rights and protections and benefits other people have had here in the US. Um, so it gives us the feeling that we're not totally recognized as full human beings. Um, so not even to this day, we're still excluded from a lot of labor, environmental, and protections, economic justice, and all that um, is still not achievable unless we organize and fight back. So the fight for human dignity, way beyond rights. I think we're in a point where it's far beyond rights, and it's more about like a feeling, I guess, of actually belonging and being equal. But the the ways that we engage with one another, um, and the history that comes with it is really it's still very present with us. So yeah, the fight for human rights continues in the fields, um, as well as in all the detention centers and all the people right now that are working that have to put up with being terrorized by ICE and a bad state. Um, so these are things that immigrants have had to face throughout the centuries here. If you just look just basic immigration history in the U.S. about what it even took to be considered a human being. It's been a long, long fight, and long struggle, and I don't think we still have a long ways to go. We always say that farm workers are like a canary in the mine. So whatever happens to farm workers will eventually happen to the rest of the general population. So if conditions and treatment are bad for farm workers, it's gonna be also bad for the rest of the population. Um, right now, with a massive surveillance state, with the massive militarization happening in our communities, is a test run to see how much we're gonna allow for other communities. So, I think we really take this moment really seriously and want to fight back. Um, like Kuya G, we also had one of our leaders, main organizers and founders of Familias Unidas por la Justicia, who was detained in the detention center in Tacoma. His name is Alfredo Juarez. He was detained in March, this March, when he was on his way to take his partner to work in the tulip fields in Mount Vernon. He was stopped by an unmarked car. Masked men got out, and within a minute of him engaging with them, he was already in handcuffs and thrown behind a car. His partner was really upset. I mean, they broke his window. Um, they yelled at him. And if you know Alfredo, he's one of the nicest, humblest people you'll ever meet. So he was really shaken up, and just the thought of him being treated like that, it got out of his guts. It's really gets us all mad. But at that, it's still to this day, it's still happening to hundreds and hundreds of other people on a daily basis. There is no stop to ICE. In fact, they're being rewarded with billions and billions of dollars because they've been effective at terrorizing our communities. And Geo Group is part of that whole network and system that has been benefiting off the pain of farm workers. Um, Alfredo was held from March, and we thought he was going to be released. Like we really had the um, really optimistic. I mean, again, I don't like using like the good immigrant versus bad immigrant thing, but if you're looking at like the good immigrant, Alfredo was like a perfect example. He'd been in the U.S. for a long time. Um, he spoke three languages: English, Spanish, and Mixteco. He was involved in the political process, so he knew the governor, the attorney general. They knew him. They engaged with him. Senators, representatives, union leaders. Everybody knew Alfredo. So we thought everybody. He was like, okay, he's gonna get released in like just a couple of days. He's gonna be in and out. Um, he went through some of the like worst treatment, also being in the detention center. Um, you know, um, Luckily, he's a pretty healthy young man. He's skinny to begin with. Um, and when we would see him at the detention center, he would just tell us about the food. Like the food was the number one thing. Um, Raw chicken, cold food, people getting sick off the food, people being denied medication, um, people they never turned off the lights, so people were sleep deprived and getting sick because of they couldn't go to sleep and rest properly. um so it was just when like again we're like, how does this happen to people that even if you are detained, it's not a criminal offense to be detained, to be here undocumented. It's not a criminal offense, it's a civil offense. But the way they're being treated is as if they were murderers or on death row on a daily basis. So, Alfredo would tell us, and, really shout out to EMA again, because they had people outside the detention center and daily visiting and keeping morale up for Alfredo and a lot of other people that are in there. And I think it had a really big effect on farm workers because our union prides itself on being out there, like protesting labor and industries, protesting the governor, boycotting, picketing, and joining other picket lines and protests. We joined a lot of the Gaza and Palestinian protests. Um, and ever since Alfredo's detention and the rise of more and more ICE agents in our community, people don't want to do that anymore. They really a chill factor has been sent to everyone, where we can't express ourselves, and if farmers are being treated bad and we can't speak up, people are going to roll over us, and that's something we can't have right now. Um, so I'm gonna put a link in here about Alfredo's situation in a bit. It's an interview that was done, and it was deep, and it's his own words. So he talks about a lot of the conditions, but yeah, the concern for us is that the human rights, like I guess there's a double standard. Some people are not yet full human beings, and have full human rights, while others are taking advantage of that and using their power to groups. Um, so the I think though that the fight um, that we're taking on is one of the most just fights that we can take on, especially right now. And I look at it, it's we can't give in to this one. Like there is no compromise. Like we have to keep fighting on a daily basis. It's tiring. I know I get tired. We all get tired, but we have to push forward. Um, there's a moment right now in history where we're getting dragged down into the darkness, and I think people look to us and organizing and a lot of other people as the way um, to have some kind of hope. The worst thing right now is to fall into despair and hopelessness. Um, I think a lot of, again, because people are looking towards all of us for some kind of guiding light, and that's a big responsibility. We live in rural communities that are dominated by MAGA. Sometimes we feel threatened all the time, but we also have a lot of experience and a lot of networks, and people, even if they don't show up to like marches or rallies, I think in the end of the day they do really back us up. Um, um, so I think we really have to flex our collective power, and the perfect time to do that. Um, one more thing, again, right now there's heavy floods in Skagit County and Whatcom County. Maybe in your community there's a lot of floods. We got to take care of the folks there. I think we have to get back to basics of doing mutual aid, feeding people when with the whole snap cuts and everything like that. We have to celebrate and be in community. People don't want to be holed up and just go to work and stay in their homes. We have to provide safe meeting places to in these days of festivals. Yeah, and I think those are the things that are gonna get us through this hard time. Just going back to basics of feeding people, housing people, taking care of one another. Um, I think that's the way I think that gives us that energy. One of the biggest things that we are gonna do for the union, even though it's risky, we are gonna throw a Christmas party for the farm workers. So we're despite the attack. That's the way that we're seeing this current moment. So even under attack, we still have to celebrate, and they can't take our joy from us. So yeah, I'll leave it at that, and thank you all for giving us time to share some thoughts.
Thank you so much, Edgar. You cut out a little bit at the end when it came to the celebration for the farm workers. So please do send along any links or any way that we can support, and we'd be glad to share that out. All these links that are going into the chat will also share out to folks over email. So thank you so much. Thank you, Edgar, for all those incredible, insights and different ways that folks can get plugged in and get involved. And lastly, but certainly not leastly, I am excited to introduce Maya Morales, who uses she, they pronouns. Maya is a legislative advocate, educator, artist, and organizer with 30 years of very diverse work experience. She fell in love with direct democracy when she helped lead a local ballot initiative campaign in 2021 on local bans on face recognition and predictive policing software and new labor protections to city government. With guidance and support of other longtime privacy advocates in Washington, Maya founded Washington People's Privacy with the goal of lifting up people's legislative advocacy, education, and growing awareness about data privacy and tech justice issues across the state, and making sure that there's this well-connected, well-positioned entity that can help a large and diverse table of people and orgs to mobilize quickly and effectively. Maya was also elected to serve on the Whatcom County Charter Review Commission this year. They also ran a competitive Working Families Party-endorsed small dollar campaign for a 4-year county council seat because progressive LGBTQ+, immigrant, Latina, and BIPOC people, tenants, food insecure, and working families don't have elected representation in their home rule county's main legislative body. And although they didn't win the council seat in November, she's in it for the long haul. So my last after you.
Thanks, Julie. Thank you all for being here. I want to acknowledge that I'm actually zooming in from the lands of the Coast Salish peoples, and really just appreciate the way that they have stewarded these lands and waterways since time immemorial. Um, I also want to just say, this is on Human Rights Day, and with this coalition, it mattered a lot to me to be here because this coalition, in my experience, has been bringing together a lot of the intersecting voices and struggles and issues in really effective conversations that like help connect dots. And so, thank you so much to Jess Rojas and Edgar Franks as well for sharing those stories. And there is so much in there that overlaps and intersects with tech justice and with surveillance right now. And so, I want to talk to you all a little bit about, zooming way out into like a world stage. Like, how does this relate to fair trade? Digital trade actually became one of the pillars in the past of possible trade agreements. What that means is basically like data flows around the planet. How does that impact us, like in our everyday lives? That's really where we're starting to see AI creep in. It's also where we are seeing algorithms that are increasingly not only making decisions about people's access to housing, screening for fraud in ways that actually gatekeep out of services a lot of people. They impact labor. We're already losing jobs because of a bunch of, technologies being used in our lives. But they're also, in terms of this conversation, becoming really like a big spotlight in terms of human rights, because our digital rights are human rights, right? I mean, we are on Zoom right now. Like, and to be very clear, this is a surveillance platform. Many of us keep our, screens off for that reason, and are careful about, our sign-in names and things like that. Literally every part of our lives has become, unless you're consciously like logging off, very much interlaced with technology. And all of the big efforts towards mass data and AI really are dependent on all of us feeding our data in to all of the technologies we use. So every click, every piece of like internet connected device, all of that stuff becomes part of that surveillance machine. So literally, if you think about what, mass data is, it's literally just surveillance of all of us on a constant basis. And so when we think about how that's impacting folks in terms of this crazy um, federal administration coming after and abducting people using this surveillance state and doubling, quadrupling the money down to grow that surveillance. This is really a little bit of right now an advocacy hot seat. And so I want to just sort of like let folks know that the same way that it takes a village, right? That it took a village to save one person at a time, right? Like, and get them out of geo groups clutches or get them, the ability to self-deport, like Leilon, um, is the same way that we have to come together on tech justice issues as well. And the coalitional organizing, Edgar is right. It's so, so critical that we don't get into silos and that we help each other. We show up, in solidarity on everybody else's fights. In Washington State, we will be going into a state legislative session. One of the kind of, I would say, edges of the fights is federal. Another one is state. And so in our state, we've been fighting to try to roll back surveillance and put safeguards. We did achieve in 2023 the first health data privacy law in the nation, which was My Health, My Data, and that protected like third-party data. And we also, put into place like some shield laws. And so there is some degree to which ICE has roadblocks due to some of those things we put in place already, but there's so much more that we need to do. And so I kind of want to like go over a couple of the things that are coming up that myself and other organizations, ACLU, we're a very broad coalition of folks and ever widening. Certainly Julie and the Fair Trade Washington Coalition as well lifts up these calls to action. We are looking at a situation where we have basically like the attempt to do book bans, but for the internet. So right now, what we have nationally is legislation that not only is pushing surveillance and you know insane federal budget for ICE and for War Machine, but also with its other hand is pushing investments in kind of locking down the internet. And this is specifically targeting people of color and LGBTQ plus people and trans folks. Um, the idea is to create a system where you have to literally show your ID. You have to get your ID verified and your age verified just to log into something or to use a site or to use an app. These kinds of laws are very dangerous. They not only screen the internet from anyone who doesn't have ID, so let's think about undocumented folks, but also they are another data point that tracks people. Another thing that we're going to be looking at fighting in Washington State. So we have a Washington State version of that and we're fighting it. We also have a federal version of that and we're fighting it. So if you see sort of age verification, a lot of times it's called children's online safety. It's actually not that at all. It's the opposite. What ends up happening is that it screens people's access to abortion, healthcare, gender affirming care information, LGBTQ plus content, immigrant rights content, whatever it is that folks want to regulate and decide is not appropriate for a certain group of people ends up being sort of like book banned from the internet. So we'll be fighting that law again in Washington State this year. We're also looking at trying to reduce the ways, hopefully ban. I'm from the perspective that surveillance is not safety, and I'm a fan of bans. But I think in terms of our legislature, we're going to have to just like look to tighten down access. Automated license plate readers are a really big deal in our state. We have evidence out of Yakima and various places that ALPRs is the abbreviation are being used to track immigrants and being used by ICE to track folks down and detain and abduct people. And so one of the things we're looking to pass in Washington State is an ALPR restrictive bill that would literally make it so that that data is not available past like a certain period of time. New Hampshire made it like a 3-day window, right? So we're going to try to go for as much as we can. There are currently meetings with privacy organizers and human rights organizers, with the governor, with, the AGO. And so we'll be trying to do that as well. I don't know how I am on time, Julie. But I can put some things in the chat as well. And I'm kind of going to put like a list of some of the things that we're working on. One of the key things around a lot of this internet stuff is like the literacy about it, and that people don't really understand. Like they'll hear like children's online safety bill, and they're like, yes. And so we just are really needing to do a lot more education and like get the word out. And so that is what we'll be working on. I'll put that list in the chat as well as like some good articles and stuff to read. The majority of it is not yet bilingual, and so we'll be working on that too. Thank you all so much for being here on Human Rights Day and yeah, gearing up for the work ahead.
Awesome. Thanks you so much, Maya, for connecting all those dots. And yeah, really important. I mean, I think everyone knows at this point the effects of, the surveillance and AI is absolutely everywhere, whether or not we like it. And so it's really important that we are, going as fast as these big tech companies, right, and trying to regulate them. I want to, before we move into our breakout room activity, which I hope if people can, they'll stick around for, because it'll be an awesome way to get more involved in what we're doing. But does anyone have any questions on, to any of our amazing speakers in terms of like their work, how folks can get involved? Thank you all. Thank you to our speakers again for sharing your amazing insights and for putting stuff in the chat. I hope I haven't missed any chat questions. I saw David, you put one in the chat. I can answer that in just a second, but just wanted to open up the floor if folks have any questions to either raise your hand or do something like this so I can see you. Any questions that we have for our incredible speakers. I would like to know, I mean, I appreciate folks putting in the chat how folks can get more involved. Maya, I did want to hear about kind of, obviously Washington and specifically the Seattle area has so much big tech money. Um, how do you organize against that?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. And I think there is a lot, when you're doing tech justice and privacy organizing. And actually, I would say it's the same with immigrant rights. You're really under a lot of threats, like your threat surface is insane. There's a lot of privacy tools that we use to organize together. We use Signal, we use, encrypted documents, things like that. I would say that I'm really excited about the flipping up of council and mayor. I think we have some real potential to roll back surveillance in some serious ways in Seattle. And Seattle's, the biggest city in Washington state, really, it's got a lot of pull. And so I'm excited about those conversations that will be happening. I don't know if you all know, but I just want to flag that Olympia did decide to remove flock safety cameras. And so I think, we're seeing some bans and some rollbacks. I forgot to kind of like ran out a bit of time and I didn't want to talk too long, but one of the really, really important things for us all to do is from wherever we are in our local community, try to enact local bans. Because whenever we can do a local ban of a technology, whether we have to do that through a people's initiative or whether we could do that through a council or a mayoral, ordinance, it really helps us at the state level to push because, yeah, big tech is huge in our state and they have, literally millions of dollars in lobbyists. And so fighting that machine takes all of us. It takes, a lot of us, and it takes us not only just sharing personal stories, but sharing with our networks to do actions like in a big way. I don't know if that answers, hopefully, Julie.
Totally, totally. And yeah, I'd love to hear Jess and Edgar what you think is on that as well. Like, how you see people power in relation to, these big corporate giants, Geo Group and all of these corporate powers that have kind of linked arms with the carceral state. And just any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear that um, both corporations and the federal government are like colluding in order to profit the pockets of the most rich in this particular situation. And so, which we've seen over and over again under this current system. And so I think a lot of folks, the day to day, don't know how immersed these big tech for-profit corporations are in the detention and deportation system. But what they do know, and the vast majority of people that I have been talking to are not okay with what we're currently seeing. Like, they're not okay with people violently having their car windows broken and being torn out of their vehicle and detained. They're not okay with severe medical neglect that results in someone's toe being amputated. They're not like okay with these different human rights violations that we see happening each and every day. But what they don't see under that is the people who are actually profiting from those horrific violations. And so I think as community organizers, we need to continue raising the alarm and exposing those who are most responsible, which can include ICE, but also all of the for-profit corporations around them that they're colluding with. Because ICE can only do their job if they have the technology to do it. They can only do their job if Geo Group is there to detain migrants. Um, so I think it's important that we expose the collusion that's happening. Um, in the Kuya Gregi example, it was because um, a commercial airline where the airline attendees themselves had no idea that there was a detainee that was being deported on their flight. Like they just had zero idea. It's like being hidden from the everyday people, which means we need to take the time to actually expose it to everyday people so we can build people power to end it as a whole.
Um, yeah, I think there's kind of I'm trying to like think about like I know like cities and communities that have been hit hard by the economy are being sought after by like Geo and um, like all these corporations to set up jails or detention centers. You know, it's like even like that whole thing with the tribes trying to get money or like Geo offering tribes money to build detention centers on their land. They know that people are suffering economically, and you know they're dangling billions of dollars in front of people that are already broke. You know, they're not dumb about what they're doing. So I think where the people power comes in is calling out officials or mayors or whoever is, you know, saying that this is the way to prosperity. If we just like give Geo all of our land or give them this thing so we can build a detention center here, you know, I think those are the things that where people really can rally behind, like get behind people, get the people that are agreeing to this out. Like we need to vote them out, shame them, whatever, you know, picket them, go to their lunch or brunch place, whatever it takes, you know, and call them out. And you know, using economic blackmail like that, it's a trick as old as time. Um, you know, I think the that is one of the things that comes to mind, that how they're using money and you know corporate money um, to really go after disadvantaged, economically disadvantaged communities. Finally, I think just to kind of but Jess was saying how people are tired of like money and like getting played by corporations. I don't know if people remember WAMEND, the initiative to ratify or put an amendment in the Constitution in the U.S. to say that corporations are not people and money is not free speech. That had some of the highest support in conservative areas. And I think there is this feeling of that people are being taken advantage of by rich corporations. But I don't know if we're not doing a good enough job or what, but there is a frustration there about corruption. There is something there that a lot of even conservative people are getting behind about the way money is being used to pollute like the democratic process. So there is something there. So that's why I say we need to go after the at the local level or state level people that are signing off on geo or more surveillance or anything like that.
Appreciate that. Thank you all again. Thanks to those putting questions in the chat. I think for time's sake, we will have to move forward. But again, I will share links with folks. And if you have any direct questions for some of our amazing speakers, please send them my way. And I will make sure those questions are answered. So thank you again to our incredible speakers for really sharing such critical insights on what it is to be on the front line for the fight for a more equitable future. Before we move into our breakout room activity, I just want to give a little bit of context for where the trade justice movement is now, just really quickly. I know that like seeing as there's just like this daily barrage of like human rights violations and illegal activity and just awful things coming out of the White House, it can be really difficult to stay on top of everything, and especially of trade issues. Understandably, it may not seem as important or urgent, but it's crucial to remember that all of these things are interconnected, right? These interlocking systems of oppression can't be separated. Our migrant neighbors who are being kidnapped off the street, a lot of them are here because of the economic devastation of free trade and corporate power in their home countries. The workers being laid off and the ones having to fight on the picket and strike lines are facing these corporations with completely outsized influence given to them by these neoliberal free trade systems. like Maya mentioned, the tech surveillance and rise of discriminatory AI is being made possible by giveaways to big tech and trade agreements. The destruction of our environment, right? We're feeling those impacts right now, and that is being compounded by free trade systems that give power to corporate polluters. All of these attacks on our trans communities, our Black and Brown communities, all of these systemic inequities are exacerbated by inequitable trade and economic policy. And we really have a unique opportunity right now to advocate for a better trading system through the US-Mexico-Canada agreement. This is President Trump's revised NAFTA trade deal from his first term in office, and it is up for review. We were promised that the USMCA would bring jobs pouring back into the US, and it certainly has not done that. Jobs are still being outsourced. The agreement still prioritizes corporate profit over environmental protection. Human rights abuses all over the continent persist as corporations exploit people. The USMCA was actually the first major trade deal to include giveaways to big tech. And so this review was really a chance to fix those failures. Only if we demand that it happens. The countries come together next July of 2026. So we have a little less than half a year to move the needle as much as we can. And we really can. I know it can seem a bit daunting and like, what can we do under this administration? I will say under the first USMCA, even though it didn't go far enough, under the Trump administration, we were able to, through like activist pressure, labor pressure, people power, we were able to pressure congressional Dems to include some language around labor rights enforcement, which has allowed dozens of workplaces in Mexico to unionize. Thousands of workers have been able to gain independent unions. So it's a drop in the bucket, but it's a drop. And, it really takes people moving the needle as much as we can. I'll include more information about really what we want to see, but a fair trade agreement looks like strengthening labor protections, raising the minimum wage, enforcing stricter environmental standards, addressing the root cause of displacement by ending agricultural dumping, which would ensure economic opportunities for workers and farmers here and particularly in Mexico, removing those big tech giveaways, etc. Again, there will be more information in my follow-up email, but it's really important that we're pushing for these things and that we're strengthening the trade justice movement, sustaining our momentum, and growing our coalition. But obviously, we need your help to do that. We're a small independent organization. We refuse funding from anyone with a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. And so we really rely on community support to keep this work going. Or we should be putting links in the chat right now. Please consider donating if you can. You can make a one-time contribution or become an individual member, which comes with exclusive benefits. But of course, we completely understand if financial support isn't an option. And signing up for our newsletter, following us on social media, and amplifying our work are all really powerful ways to help. And another powerful way to help and to support our work is being active in this next activity. So I'll give folks a second to look through those links maybe, but basically I would love us to do a collective resistance brainstorm. So really the purpose of this activity is to ensure that we have community input in our organizing work and for our community members to shape the work that us as a coalition are doing into the next year. So I really encourage you to think about some of the things you've heard today as we conduct this activity. So the way it's going to work, hopefully, is we'll be going into breakout rooms of about 4 to 5 to discuss the questions that I am putting in the chat right now. There they are. And so it would obviously we want to capture people's thoughts. That's the whole point of this. So please do designate one person as a kind of note taker, and we really want to capture what's being said. And then after 10 minutes, we'll come together. So we'll have about 10 minutes. We'll come together. We'll do a quick report back, share some ideas. So also maybe have someone in mind to do the report back if it's not the note taker. So I will read the questions and then I'll launch the breakout rooms and you'll be able to click join the breakout room. So let me read the questions now. We also might come by because the questions might disappear from the chat. So we'll come by and put them back into your breakout room chat, but you can kind of start discussing. So the first question is, what actions or events would both show solidarity with our frontline communities and get the attention of the Trump administration and or congressional delegation? And what types of organizations should be included in the trade justice movement and have a seat at the negotiating table? So like generally like labor unions, migrant advocacy organizations, et cetera. And specifically, are there any organizations you know of, maybe you're part of an organization and you want to get more involved in the Washington Fair Trade Coalition, or you know of some that you think should have a seat at the table? So those are the questions. I will go ahead and launch the breakout rooms. Let's see if I can do that somewhat seamlessly. So anyways, want to open up the floor. I feel like we're a small enough group that folks can just pipe up. Yeah, I don't know. Anyone have any thoughts about the questions we asked? What types of actions would be helpful to show solidarity, and what type of organizations? Or if you didn't get to that, generally, like any thoughts or anything like that?
I'll say something. I asked Maya about what the efforts were to contact community college and universities and try to engage youth in all these issues. So she knows a little bit about that, but it'll go in the chat, I think, and be sent out to people.
Awesome. Maya, and then Elise, you can go.
Yeah, we also talked about both David and Doris brought up some events around WTO history and archival stuff, and as well as a film festival that I think that might be what is in the chat. David, I guess if that's not what is in the chat, then put the film fest in the chat. But also he brought up this issue around ports and the need to actually just go down to port commission meetings and that then brought up data centers. And I actually connected those because I feel like one of the things that we're going to need to look at in terms of connecting youth and our actions on AI and environment, as well as labor justice and economic justice, is actually targeting economic development, ports, and all of the legislative bodies that make these decisions about whether or not to bring data centers, right, to various counties and to our state. And so there's a growing movement to object to them, but it's really important for people to connect the dots, right? That it's not just about AI as like an objective thing. It's also about the ways that it's impacting environment as well as like socially our lives. The amount of control that it gives to our systems is really over the top. So those intersections are something we talked about a little bit.
Thank you. That's awesome. But Elise, do you want to go?
Yeah, so in our group, we mainly discussed two big things that are happening in Seattle, which would be like the May Day March that happens every March 1st, and then the FIFA World Cup that's coming up. And then as far as getting more groups involved, we talked about environmental justice groups and having labor at the table, you know, as many as we can, just having that input.
Really appreciate that. Yeah, definitely. May Day is going to be a huge one for like international worker solidarity. We're thinking about how we can, how we can support, how we can show up, how we can make sure that trade is part of that conversation, because it's obviously a really important piece of it. So really appreciate that. And yeah, environmental and labor groups, you know, definitely need to be at the table. Any other thoughts folks had?
So in the group, we were talking also about as a specific environmental group was, for instance, 350.org. And also including trade unions, like including small trade unions. And also maybe about boycotting, like boycotting big corporation like Amazon or targets, and take the model, or maybe also include Indivisible as an organization, or try to see what they are doing or connect with them.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Yeah, small trade unions, 350.org. We're, we Selden, who was here but had to leave us with 350 Seattle. We work with a lot of the 350s, but there are definitely lots of other 350 chapters that we work with. I know Hillary is with our national partner, and they work closely with 350.org. But yeah, these are all great thoughts. Appreciate it. Any other thoughts? Really love getting all of this, and we'll definitely inform our work, and I'll be bringing all this to our next board meeting. So really appreciate it. And it will, yeah, directly go into, some of our campaign planning. So I'll open the floor once more if we miss anything.
I'll just share in my group. We just spent all of the time discussing question one on how to build solidarity and get the attention of the administration or the state level. And so we discussed a few ideas. Jill shared a lot on the strategies that they use for Kyoji case this past weekend, and they shared about engaged leaders, faith leaders, hunger striking, medical testimonials, and just giving lots of examples where a lot of people really engaged in this campaign. And it was shared like a phrase of striking from all corners and just finding creative ways to keep that momentum going. And I share that the question really popped up in my mind what happened in Portland a few months ago, and how, what really got the attention of the Trump administration were the frogs in costumes. And that was like a very creative way to, get their attention, and also, stand in solidarity with the immigrant communities. And so I connected that with what the speaker shared on, celebrating too, having space to celebrate wins. And yeah, and so I didn't give a concrete answer, but I think finding creative ways where we can build solidarity and also yeah, celebrate and have those joyful moments too.
Yeah, super appreciate that. I mean, I recognize that, maybe 10 minutes wasn't it wasn't the most time to talk about two loaded questions, but really appreciate that. And yeah, I think a lot about what you're talking about with creativity and kind of like the theatrics of it. I think a lot of this administration is all about show. It's all about showmanship in a really cruel, awful way. But I think there is something to like responding to that, in a theatrical way, and kind of an absurd way, right? We're living through this very absurd dystopian time, and it's very real, and it's nothing to, make light of, but to hold those places for creativity and to respond in the same theatrical way, but make it fun and joyous, I think is something that's really powerful. So I really appreciate all of what you said. And yeah, like you said, learning from, this incredible victory with Koyaji and all the, there's so much to learn with all of these movements and all of these incredible organizers that we heard from. And yeah, it's just so important that we are in spaces like these to really share about, what we're doing and what works, and how to kind of get reinvigorated. Maya, go for it. I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, I forgot to add that, one thing I just briefly said in terms of like what am I doing to try to connect is actually like really hyper local, like trying to connect my neighborhood, right? Like, and I mean, I did that as a candidate in some ways, like just knocking doors, right? Like I knocked thousands of doors this past election, but I think we all can really benefit from a lot more of like engaging with our hood. And even if it's not certain neighbors you don't like, whatever, but like, especially like fellow renters or working poor people, working families, folks who kind of get it. And then also folks who don't, I think as Edgar pointed out, like there's a lot of questions that a lot of people are having about this administration, and it's really like hitting a lot of pain points for a lot of people, no matter what their politics. So I think like really just trying to do more stuff, whether that's like, trying to bring your neighborhood together for a potluck or an event or whatever it is. I think it's really key right now. And building possible like mutual aid networks for emergencies for, I mean, I don't know. I feel like it might be going too far to say that we need a new underground railroad, but I feel like that is sort of the tip I'm on in terms of like how much neighbors may need to be helping each other over the next couple of years.
Totally. Yeah, I really appreciate that point about the hyperlocal. And I think that's something that we are always working for, especially with the Washington Fair Trade Coalition. Like trade happens, like the discussions and the meeting rooms happen at this international level. It's really kind of complex and abstract and wonky, but the lived impacts happen on a hyperlocal level. And so making those connections and trying to get folks to have a seat at this table is so important. So I appreciate that. I think this is all really incredible for, we've gone a little bit past 7:30. And so I want to respect everyone's time. I appreciate everyone who stuck till the end. I really appreciate that. I know it wasn't all smooth sailing, but I really do appreciate everyone's contributions. I'll be sending an email to all of you who registered, so you'll have my email. Please feel free if you have something else or something else pops up, please let me know. Also, please use that email freely. Please email me anytime. Would love to continue to have these conversations. And thank you all again so much for this really incredible event. And I hope you have a lovely holiday season and are able to maybe relax a little bit. But other than that, we will see you in the new year, and we will be incorporating all of this into our campaign strategy. So thank you all again. Yeah, we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody,
Bye. Thank you.
for giving voice to lots of people.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Night.